You're listening to the ZTitic Newscast on the ZTitic News Network with your hosts, Dave, and Xavier Diamant. Proceed by inquiry.
Welcome to episode 52 of the ZTitic Newscast. We are your hosts, myself, Dave, and
Xavier Diamant.
In the house, it is March 5th. Hard to believe, 2025. We always seem to say it at the beginning of the episode, but time just flies, and especially since the inauguration, everything is moving at an even more rapid, accelerated pace. To jump right into it, wanted to mention a couple housekeeping items, and I think it will help us get the conversation started today. Today's episode is called The Reset Precipice, coined by Xavier, and I think it's apropos. In the description, I mention, regardless of where you stand ideologically, cosmologically, etc., I think everybody, or at least the large majority of people, agree that we're on the precipice of some sort of major societal reset. And so today's episode, we're just going to be having a very open discussion about not just what has transpired since our last show, which was at the beginning of January, but looking back. You have to kind of look back while you look at the present in order to prognosticate the future. And that's what we've been doing at ZTitic News Network since we started 5 or 6 years ago at this point. Our tagline is proceed by inquiry, and that's what we're inviting our audience to do when they engage with our content, is not just dismiss nor accept the information presented, but to proceed by inquiry, ask questions of yourself, of your preconceived notions of the information, and what might happen in the future. The housekeeping items really have to do with a new tool that Xavier introduced to the ZTitic News Network. I'm surprised I hadn't come across it already, because we've been talking behind the scenes about ways we can grow the channel, grow the network, and grow our audience. And one of the things that's really been a bottleneck is just the time it takes to find relevant clips within our long-form discussions that are relevant, prescient, whatever, produce them, and then upload them to the various social media sites. And he shared what's it called, Opus Clip or Opus.pro.
Yeah.
And it's an incredible piece of software that uses nonlinear editing frameworks with AI, and it's so easy to just drop a link, and it doesn't have to even be your original content. It could be any link you have on Rumble or YouTube, and it will scan the conversation that's taking place, and you get to prompt it to kind of build different clips, and you can then go in and enhance them with captions and watermarks and all this stuff. Anyways, it saves a ton of time, and as a result, I've been able to go kind of back in the time machine of the old episodes and start to harvest some of those gems that took place in past conversations, which some of these videos we're talking about have like 30 or 40 views, and they're 3 or 4, 5 years old, and they deserve to be revisited because, like I mentioned in the introduction, looking back into the past, you can learn a lot about what's happening now, and then we also do a lot of prognosticating in the past included. So it's fun to look back and see what came true and what didn't come true that we were talking about at the time. And so if you head over to the Zetitic News Network channel, which I'll do right now, you can see we've been publishing pretty regularly, once every other day or so, a clip from one of our past shows. And I'm also using AI to generate relevant thumbnails to, you know, put a new kind of fresh lipstick on the page, and to kind of kick off the conversation, because I think a lot of what we'll inevitably talk about is what everybody's talking about, and that's what's happening with the U.S. government and the new administration. A clip that we pulled from, actually what I did was I put in the recent Joe Rogan experience with Elon Musk, because there was a very interesting segment in there about exotic technology and its possible sequestration. And I almost called you the other day just to talk about it and see if we could like record the phone call. But I was like, let me see if I can use this tool to kind of create a clip that then we can use on the show to sort of launch us into tonight's discussion about the reset precipice. And before I do that, our thumbnail, I'll bring it up on screen, is a little kid about to press the reset button on an original Nintendo Entertainment System, and you see in the monitor a picture of, it could be the globe, it could be something else, you know. And so that was kind of like our thumbnail for today's episode, the reset precipice. But anyways, I want to play this clip. This is Elon Musk on the Joe Rogan Experience talking about UFOs and their possible suppression, and then I'd love to get Xavier's thoughts to kick off tonight's show.
During Elon Musk's most recent appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience,
AI voiceovers
he was
too.
asked about the existence and possible sequestration of breakthrough propulsion technologies. In a shocking, but not too surprising hand-wave dismissal, listen to Elon's argument from authority, which basically amounts to, I launch the best rockets and should know, and since I don't, therefore no. You'll also hear him laughably assume that since he's familiar with other military-industrial companies, that there's no possibility for a breakthrough to evade or be concealed from his top security clearance. This is hilarious, given what Elon's own Doge organization has taught us about the ability for black budget funding to be hidden from public scrutiny.
So you're the guy to ask about this. What if any possibility is there that there is some sort of advanced propulsion system technology that's being worked on in secret? And that they're trying to cover this up with this talk of aliens and alien tech and not of this world. And is it possible that there's some sort of very secret program that's going on in cahoots with some defense contractors that are developing advanced propulsion systems that they're using for these drones?
I mean, SpaceX, you know, my company SpaceX has the most advanced rocket technology in the world. I think I'd know.
Right.
And to the best of my knowledge, there is not any magic. There's not like some super advanced propulsion technology.
There have been people who have theorized different gravity drives and different things. Is there anything that's ever gotten past the theoretical stage?
No.
Nothing.
Well, there's nothing even that I'm aware of that works in theory. It's not like I would like this to exist, to be clear. I would like this to exist. And I have from a security clearance standpoint, I have top secret. I have equivalent of like an all access pass from a security clearance standpoint. So I don't think they're hiding it from me, basically. I don't think they could.
I want to pause on that moment, because that's kind of his first main argument, is because we make the best rockets in the world and I have a top security clearance, they can't hide it from me. It's like having a top secret security clearance doesn't allow you to go into the proprietary IP laboratories of every defense contractor that there is. Unless I'm wrong. Does it?
No, one. And two, just because he hasn't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? It's absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
Right.
So he's committing that fallacy right off the bat, saying that, "Oh, well, I'm the barometer for truth on this subject because I'm involved with the I'm a professional space pornographer, and there ain't no better cameras or better view of technology than what you're gonna get from my brand, buddy. So just trust me, okay?"
Unless it's completely in these weapons manufacturing corporations.
I mean, I know these weapons manufacturing companies, like Boeing, Lockheed, and Northrop. I mean, yeah, they do some interesting things, but they do not have. There's no breakthrough that they have.
So
I'm confident they do not have a breakthrough.
what do you think the people are
We're
seeing?
launching a rocket every 2 days.
But what do you think these people are seeing when you have reliable people like Commander David Fravor, who had that infamous Tic Tac experience off the coast of San Diego, where they got this thing on video, they tracked it going 50,000 feet above sea level to 50 feet in like a second.
Okay.
Yeah. And then they also have video evidence of this thing accelerating at a great speed, eyewitness accounts from two different
Okay.
jets.
Sure. I mean, does anyone have a high-res video or photo of this thing?
Well, there's a video of this thing where they're locked onto it, and then it takes off. It shoots off
Is it
out of the
high-res?
frame. No, it's like whatever the systems they used on fighter jets in 2004. Essentially like Windows 95.
I mean, there's like somebody did a curve of like the resolution of UFOs and the resolution of cameras. The UFO resolution has stayed flat,
Right.
despite megapixels in cameras going like, super high.
Well, according to Christopher Mellon,
Why are they still blurry?
Christopher Mellon, who worked in the State Department, said that they have high-resolution photos and videos of these things, and that's all that he's seen it. It's all locked away. Whenever people say that to me, I'm like, don't even tell me that then. Don't, unless you have
Just leak it, for God's sake.
Put it out there.
Yeah.
Like, let it slip.
Talk about letting it slip there.
Yeah,
I mean, that he literally just regurgitated Neil deGrasse Tyson there.
I felt the same way, that this, when you're kind of cornered on a subject and you don't want to even give the audience any idea that you know something that you're not supposed to talk about, you just make a joke of it. And that's exactly what he did.
Absolutely.
It's just mocking.
It's a classic Masonic mockery, hand wavium, where you kind of avoid the topic by selecting a sort of superficial reliance on a commonly associated piece of evidence, right? Like video footage. Because, of course, that's the only indication.
High res.
High res video, guys, is the only piece of evidence that we can possibly have about advanced technological prior hegemonies or suppressed advancements therein. He's using a false association, a superficial and false association with only one set of evidentiary criteria to sort of hand wave away the entire topic, which, that combined with his appeal to authority just shows you he's a gatekeeper. He's not an honest, zetetic inquirer into this subject matter. He's there to, don't worry your little head, little pleb, about this little issue. Believe me, I know. Okay, so trust my brand, watch my rockets. Okay, you're going to love it.
I wanted to start the episode off on that, not only to highlight the different clips that we're now putting out that are definitely worth checking out. We have two different YouTube landing pages, ZTITIC News Network, which is streaming this video now, and then a sister one called ZTITIC News Clips, which is lesser known. And some of the clips that we've posted on ZTITIC News Network have already been banned by YouTube. One from our episode 14, which was first aired October of 2020, talking about the Hegelic dialectic, of course, the cerveza virus, which you're still apparently not supposed to talk about on YouTube in certain terms. So you can sometimes find clips on Ztitic News clips that you couldn't otherwise find on Ztitic News Network. But I wanted to bring that up as well because Musk is no longer this kind of eccentric CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, ex PayPal guy. He's now running the Doge organization, and I see a lot of excitement and hope around the revelations to do with that, as well as trust being, extended to him and what he's doing. And I'll admit, some of the things that have come out they're not surprising, but they're shocking. They are shocking to see it as part of the national conversation. But if there was a message I could pass on in this episode, is kind of be careful what you wish for with Musk. And of course, you don't need to tell that to the people on the left. This is more the people on the right, especially in the liberty movement right, if I can make that subcategory, because a lot of them are very excited and hopeful that this is going to result in the government descaling that we want and that would benefit society. Because clearly with this clip, Musk is not necessarily the most trustworthy guy.
No.
And
far from it.
What's he doing bringing data engineers and computer scientists in? It doesn't take a genius mathematician to know that the government systems are extremely antiquated. Talk to anybody in software business. That's a hallmark of the government. Everybody knows the government is extremely inefficient. The databases don't talk to each other. And yes, of course, that is a breeding ground for fraud and waste. Absolutely. But
by design,
like we talked about in this banned clip, Hegelian dialectic, I'm also contending with the possibility that we've got the problem, which is waste, fraud, and abuse, to use the administration terms. The reaction, which is a complete overhaul, uncovering, a Norton antivirus kind of scan of the systems, that's Doge, saying, look, we've got 300-year-old people in the Social Security database. Obviously, who can argue that that should be looked at? But the solution is what I'm concerned about, right? Do we want a conversion from the antiquated system where the databases don't talk to each other and government's very inefficient to a super efficient government that can track and surveil you like with AI?
Like a streamlined panopticon? Is that
So that's my concern that I wanted to kind of float by you, Xavier, see what you thought.
And that's why I say by design. I think that this sort of problem reaction solution script is really highly wrought out and very much premeditated and applies to so many different fields simultaneously, but specifically within this government inefficiency dialectic, it's almost like they intentionally built government as this pile of blame for a facilitation to a new, more panopticonic system. It's like they could have made it more commonsensical and streamlined and transparent all this time. All the technologies for streamlining government and transparency have existed for dozens of years. So it begs the questions, well, why didn't they ever implement this deflationary superior technology beforehand? Oh, it's timed under this aegis of, we need more technocratic solutions, more sort of top down governance over government.
Right.
Right. And so the creation of this kind of technocratic governance control grid is very much in line with the overall Hegelian dialectic, which is to expand what constitutes the state itself and its invasion and prominence in all sectors of life and society. I mean, it's really, techno charlatanry, or the technotronic era, pseudoscientific charlatanry matrix. All of this is being coagulated to create a kind of hyperstatism, where everyone succumbs to the Masonic temptation, right? Which is, if you can't beat them, join them. And so if they can create a seemingly inescapable panopticon, then everyone becomes the warden within which they are prisoners.
Right.
And that I think is Musk is a sort of front man for that movement. He's getting the Rockefeller treatment and the Warren Buffett treatment, to where he's kind of being heralded as this next generation of economic genius, right? That's his rockets are like Rockefeller's ice cream, right? or Warren Buffett's pennies, and
at
dimes
the beginning at the beginning of the episode, I hesitate to play it because I don't know if I can find it exactly, but if you go to the beginning 10 or 15 minutes of the episode with Joe Rogan, I think aired last week, he demos a AI agent that his company has built, and he's been promoting Grok, which is the competitor to ChatGPT, but he's created this agent which has different personality modes essentially, and he sets the mode to unhinged and to a female, and so he literally has a conversation in the phone with the microphone right there, and you can hear what the phone is playing, and he engages in conversation with this person. And it was kind of a revelation of the method, in my opinion, because I have suspected for at least since he took over X that his X personality was an AI agent.
Right.
And that was just a suspicion. I had no real hard evidence to back it up, other than all of his dealings and involvement with AI development and his growing responsibility as the CEO of this company and that company, and now his political involvement, and people like Joe Rogan asking legitimately, how can he have the time to do all this and be on Twitter making these posts and so on? Does he have an AI like running his Twitter? And then you have guys like Vashiva, who ran for Senate, I think, making the allegation that the Trump and Musk contingency, if you will, they use things like Palantir and other technologies to basically aggregate sentiment for themselves, figure out what the keywords and key topics of interest are for the liberty movement at large, and then to kind of piggyback on top of that.
Right, create little sort of soft renditions of the truth that they want to see.
And listen,
right.
like he said, I want to believe in these anti-gravitic.
Right, that was a big appeal. Right, that was sort of.
I want these to exist. I also want
appeal to sympathy.
I want
right.
Doge and I want Trump. I want them to all be white hats, and I want to be rescued. Like, I do want that. But I would be naive to not consider the possibility that like they are a next generation enemy,
right?
That is more in tune with the propaganda of today than like the older generation of politicians, and they're using it to their advantage,
right?
Not for our benefit, but potentially for something down the line that will rear its head, which this current period of time kind of paved the way for.
sort of
It's a concern,
Overton window,
right?
social and
Right.
Psychological engineering,
And
right?
I have to look at the facts and the history, and people will excuse Trump for his response to COVID, as having been fooled, or he doesn't have the culpability that you might normally apply to a president overseeing a quote unquote pandemic. But if he wants to take credit for this and that, you have to also carry some blame for this and that as well. And, I haven't heard him walk back any of his, even though he's got RFK in there, I haven't heard him walk back any of his praise of the vaccine manufacturers and their dirty dealings. And he's out there lauding this multi-$100 billion investment between, I forget who it is, is it SoftBank and Oracle and maybe one or two other AI companies, Apple.
Yeah.
They're going to build all these AI data centers. And you got Larry Ellison out there on the financial news networks talking about, we can use AI to build these mRNA vaccines that'll read your DNA and figure out exactly what's wrong with you and fix you.
Wow.
What do they call them? Customized vaccines, or so I don't know. I have my suspicions and my concerns.
And it's highly rational at this point to suspect ulterior motives, conflicts of interest, and hidden agendas. I mean, it's now to the point of irrationality to try to hand wave all of those concerns away and say that they are moot and irrelevant, or just basically blinders on myopic copium that the establishment wants everyone to adopt. That's the current sort of du jour method of quelling skepticism or suppressing criticism of the sort of current regime is, if you have a problem with the way things are going, then you must be a wokeist. They're adding this kind of new way of dismissing the attempt to hold these various people accountable. And it's like, who watches the watchers, right? How can we be so sure that this kind of selective cleavering of government isn't really just a way for the technocratic governance superstructure to basically ensconce itself so much that it basically becomes the de facto government? At what point does the need to streamline things become a way to grease the skids for even higher tech tyranny?
Right. I had this article up on screen, and they've somehow locked off. When I read this on my phone, I could see the full article, but I can't see it here now because there was an excerpt I wanted to read, but it's an MSM publication, Wired, talking about 150-year-olds aren't collecting Social Security benefits. And it goes into this esoteric issue around the systems themselves being programmed in COBOL. And COBOL is a 60-year-old programming language that basically nobody ever uses anymore. Nobody teaches in university. And it runs a lot of the systems in Social Security Administration, including the Internal Revenue Service. And the problem is, these systems have been around for such a long time. It does take a huge overhaul, which, if there's this much fraud going on within them, I can envision people just lobbying behind closed doors. Look, you don't want to open that can of worms. But the problem that's now coming to a head is the talent pool of people who can program in COBOL, or they're retired or they're dying. and since nobody's learning it, they can't hire anybody to go in and fix it. Now, maybe AI can come in, and maybe that's why Elon was brought in, right? Is like AI, we can teach it programming languages now. We can have AI go in and figure this out. But again, do we want COBOL to transition off COBOL into a newer, more technologically sound and modern system? A lot of statists will be like, yeah, hell yeah. Like, yeah, we need, and interestingly, Doge, you hear on the left this criticism, you had no authority to set up Doge. It's like, actually, they just renamed something that Obama created called the U.S. Digital Service, USDS. And that was created to create the Obamacare website, which was a complete failure. But, it's just mass confusion, because like the left is obsessed with his authority, all of a sudden his constitutionality, which they never gave a shit about, before.
Right.
Establishing an agency, of course they're wrong, because we've already given all this power to the president to just create agencies.
Exactly.
Okay, so they're wrong on that technical point, but then he does have the authority, but that's not even what he did. He renamed something that your Messiah and Savior Obama created. You're not worried about his authority to create USDS. You didn't give a shit then. You were actually excited about it.
Right.
So we're still in this Coke and Pepsi.
Absolutely, and that's the thing about the left's grievances with Elon is they
picked the wrong things.
Exactly. All of their criticisms.
Same with Trump.
Same with Trump. They all come from much more superficial, myopic frames of reference that don't actually get into the nitty gritty of really why you should be critical of these people.
I've been dying to ask you this. I'll see if I can pull it up while we're talking, because we haven't had a show since this came out. The video that Trump posted of the reimagined Gaza.
Oh gosh, it's a very.
What I wanted to ask you is, you've probably heard I think you've even used it. The term Zion Dawn, right? Like, we know he puts on the Kabbalah, and or yarmulke, puts on the yarmulke, and
he's received the Kabbalah Tree of Life award, right?
And all that. Right. But did you ever think it would be like that? Like, so it's almost comical. Like, we're gonna build hotels and shit like that.
It's gonna be like my casinos in Atlantic City, baby.
It's an AI generated video.
Donald's coming to set you free, bringing the light for all to see. No more tunnels, no more fear. Trump Gaza is finally here.
Why did those women have beards? Is that a thing there?
Oh, I see that. Oh my gosh. Wow.
That's a little weird, huh?
Yeah, that's a little bit of like subliminal sprinkle there.
Hey, we're gonna free your people. We're gonna bring our democracy there, and you everybody's gonna be trannies like we are.
Well, it's
I don't remember hearing anybody talk about that.
Kosher sexuality there. There's many
show a little ankle. Show a little ankle.
Many genders according to the Talmud. Absolutely.
It's finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright. Golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza #1. Trump Gaza shining bright. Golden future, a brand new light.
Wow.
Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza #1.
With him and BB.
What's that, baby?
That was BB. Sipping daiquiris there by the pool at the very end.
Oh yeah.
Go back.
That totally, unmistakably AI generated Bibi Netanyahu. That's crazy. I didn't even notice that the first time through.
It's truly shameless.
Yeah, come on, that's Bibi right there.
They're
and Trump's right there.
They're just putting it in your face right there. I mean, it's really.
See, this is what
no amount of glitter that you could swallow would make the spit less disrespectful, right? there's a lot of glitter in that spit in the eye. You know?
Right.
There's a lot of glitter there, but you're gonna have to ignore the brutality that would get that place looking like that, and the ongoing narrative behind why that's necessary, and who's even gonna profit off of the creation of such a.
You have multi-generational hatred.
Well,
and destruction. Like,
and it's like, okay, are the people who used to live there for 30 generations prior to the fall of the temple, or after the fall of the temple, do they get dividends from the hotels? You know, probably not. It's probably Kushner and Associates that get all the proceeds, right? And I mean, not to mention all of the natural gas and all the resources there in that part of the Mediterranean, right off the Gaza Strip there. I mean, it's like in Trump's whole thing, it's like, oh no, we're gonna make it better, guys. We're gonna come in there, we're gonna glitchify it. It's not even habitable right now. Why would anyone want to stay there? Come on. It's like, why is it not inhabitable? You're not gonna investigate?
right.
As to how it got in that condition? You're not gonna point the finger as
Yeah,
to
and
who
the
caused
other thing
Who
I've been
brought
meaning
it
to
to
look
that
into
condition?
is I saw, I think today, that they've either said they're going to in the near future, or they already are pausing all foreign aid. And I'm like, does that include Israel? I haven't looked into it, so I
No,
don't
it
know.
doesn't.
But
Probably not.
there's probably no way, right?
Well, also didn't the Supreme Court say that you can't do a complete freeze because these are still balances outstanding for
Right.
services
Contracts.
already rendered.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's just how many of those contracts had multi-year obligations?
Probably a
probably
substantial
most of
number.
them.
Of them.
So
Yeah.
it just seems like it's a lot of, dancing on the pin of a needle a little bit, where what's actually the move here, Oh, we're going to impose tariffs. Oh, there's exemptions. Oh, there's
pauses, delays.
Oh, there's delays. Oh, it just seems like this. It's like he's just trying to stir the pot to where he can profit off of the or create a new structure of power based off the swirl. He's trying to extrapolate the chaos from the stirring of the pot to become like a Frankenstein, or like a new golem for like this new era of technotronic governance. And I think I called it out before he was elected that this Trump iteration is more like kind of technocracy wrapped in nativism, right? That the agenda is to grease the skids on the technotronic era in a way that the left and the Dems could never do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They could never push that envelope, right? And so, we come from a sort of understanding that really the whole left-right paradigm is really just competing managerial firms within the same corporate governance structure. That they have an overall agenda that they mutually accomplish while appearing to be in opposition. And whatever one branch pushes, the other could never get away with amongst their base. And so that's the whole point of the political polarization, is to create this encampment or this kind of division amongst the population where everyone is rooting for ultimately the same agenda, thinking that they're opposing the other side. But actually, philosophically, cosmologically, psychologically, in terms of statecraft and political science, they're advancing the same ultimate cause. And, people might balk at that, but it's the classic Lenin thing. Like, what's the best way to control the opposition? It's to lead it. So,
Right.
and I don't think that, neo-Marxism or communism has been defeated simply because Trump is in office.
Right.
You know, this kind of naive realism on the right where like, oh no, we really are making progress and we're going to root out the universities. But in reality, it's the Zio-Commie dialectic. You know, they're both on the same ultimate team, right? They have similar origins, but the rhetoric is markedly different, and the presentation of opposition is front and center between the two. When ultimately, they're kind of advancing a similar overall command and control sort of top-down structure by design based on different appeals to activate and mobilize their polarized respective bases. And so I see it as sort of a neo-Trotskyite sort of proto-Lenin attempt of balkanizing America politically within. And they have to do it in a very sophisticated way because they know that large swaths of the population, they're no longer placing any kind of trust or legitimacy within this three-ring circus that we're calling American politics. So they know they have limited time, but ultimately they have to keep upping the ante and upping the stakes because the propaganda mind control tactics don't last as long as they used to. That's why they have to constantly have an information saturated headline memory hole kind of consciousness that dominates amongst the masses. And you know, in some ways people, you know, again, it's like on the left you'll find sometimes these people who understand the sort of command and control danger that both sides bring to the table. But then, just like with folks on the right, they get kind of caught up in the sort of surface minutia of the hot button issues that you're supposed to be upset about.
Right.
When in the grand scheme of things, these are sort of dog toys. You know, these are bones.
It's
that are being
frustrating
thrown.
because if you're focused on that bigger picture,
it's very frustrating.
It's very frustrating to talk to people because they want to pull you into that minutia,
right?
And it's very difficult to reorient them without triggering them. Essentially,
absolutely.
I think they begin to feel that you think you're smarter than them, and they can't get around the new information that's being presented without trying to kill the messenger.
Absolutely. And
I'll give you an example. I go back and forth all the time with a relative of mine, and she does this thing where, you know, like around the executive orders, like this is illegal, that's illegal, he doesn't have the authority to do this. And I'll say, you know, because I think she's projects onto me that I'm a Trump supporter because she also presents a lot of information about what he's doing that is just not true.
Right.
And instead of, I will argue that particular piece of information is not true, and then she categorizes that as Trump support.
Right.
Even though she knows that I never voted for him.
Right.
You know, so then we get into the minutia of this executive order, that executive order, and I'm like, look, if you want to complain about executive power and the executive order's existence, I'm all for that conversation, but I need some like openness that you've just recently come around to this because you weren't concerned about Joe Biden's executive orders or Obama's executive orders. I don't ever, you know,
right.
Like that's, I think, what it's such a powerful tool to balkanize, you know, because even if it gets challenged in court, you know, it's kind of like when you, there's a press conference about this suspect who did this, that, and the other, and they get to present this suspect as a certain thing, but they haven't even had their day in court yet. It's guilty by media. So like the executive order is almost like being used now as the bully pulpit.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'll just do this and I'll do that. I mean, some of them are hilarious.
It's almost like the
Like
secular,
the Gulf of America,
right?
the straws, the plastic straws.
Absolutely. You know what it really reminds me of is the political differences between the different popes and the different bulls that they issue. And it's almost like the office of the president has now become a kind of secular pulpit for what is the equivalent of like a corporate pope. And that basically each new president, each new iteration is like a new pope for the secular public.
Well, this is, it's actually, I'm enjoying it.
Yeah,
because
it's entertaining.
It's
designed to be.
entertaining, but it's also, I think it's exposing people to government without the glove on in a lot of ways, including the proponents of Trump, because, you know, while there's all this buzz and excitement about using the executive orders to implement my mandate from the public, a lot of people are wondering legitimately, well, if we're just like hinging our future on this executive order, you know, he can't run next term.
Exactly.
And he would also probably be way too old at that point anyways.
Right.
What's to keep the next generation opposition from just day one executive order that rolls back all the last 600 of them, you know?
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
And I've heard that question asked, and the administration had to, I forget, maybe JD Vance or something, well, we're working on encoding these changes into law. And it's like, well, how much of what was wiped away with the executive order was encoded in law to begin with? Right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a multi-generational sort of quandary, because every single new president just expands the office and ups the leverage of the executive to play corporate pope, basically.
Right. Well, and I could be wrong, you know, about the peeling back of regulations, but I've seen Trump talk about, well, we're going to implement a rule where if you want one new regulation, you have to repeal 10. I like that, but like, that's still new regulations.
Yeah, and it's like,
can the new regulations include regulations that were repealed?
right.
You know, we're still dealing with a predator class of lawyers, and the devil's in the fine print.
Yep.
And most people don't read that fine print, so
Correct.
be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, and the thing is, both Trump and Musk, they represent a certain segment of the corporate mafia that is more inclined towards sort of mass confusion, right, as a technique for keeping people on their toes, right? Trump's a Hollywood man. You know, he spent a lot of his time in show business, so he knows that, and that's why I think they've kept him around for this long, for this particular part of the 2020s, is to still keep people
Tuned in.
And to keep people attached to the legacy system as much as possible. And Musk very much represents, on a sort of cosmological grand narrative scale, the establishment as well. You know, he's the new rocket man. We're gonna go to Mars, baby. You know, trust me and my giant space rockets blasting off, baby. Space sex. You know, I mean, come on. It's an insult to people's intelligence on its face. The guy's clearly a pseudoscientific techno charlatan, but he's part of this broader script. He's part of this broader entertainment for for the public, to manufacture consent, to give implied assent to the given structure and ordering of things, however disruptive and confusing it is, and that's the whole psychological component of this script, is to hypnotize, to get people into sort of a hypnotic relay that lends legitimacy to the show itself. And if people are lending legitimacy to the show itself by thinking that these people are actually as they are being represented and how they represent themselves to us, then that's a form of that's a vote to keep it going. That's a vote psychologically, spiritually, that there is legitimacy to it. But in reality, it's a giant ritual. It's a massive, long-standing, multi-generational spellcast. And, people don't want to go there. They don't want to see that big picture social engineering analysis for what it is. And the tactics, the tactics and the techniques that have been used very much accord to the success of the charlatans and the con men of the 19th century. It's almost like they took the success of many of those traveling con men and just extrapolated it on a massive, hundreds of trillions of dollar corporate scale.
Right.
And that's what we're dealing with on the massive big picture level.
Going back to the first clip we played, which was Elon Musk on Joe Rogan talking about UFOs, and he mentioned he wanted them to exist. He wanted breakthroughs to exist. Likewise, I like a lot of the rhetoric. I want Trump to be the white hat. I want there to be a white hat. And a part of me, admittedly, is celebrating when I see, for example, where is it? The IRS is drafting plans to cut as much as half of its 90,000 person workforce. I love it when I see, laid off IRS workers
Bring it on
TV crying about how they lost their work from home job. I actually like that.
Yeah,
because
there's Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude is a big vehicle for this movement for sure.
But what I'm getting at is, while I like a lot of what I'm seeing and hearing, I have to stay grounded. Mm-hmm. And for years we talked about hologram Joe and how Joe Biden is like he could be all of the above: a rubber mask, body double, a holographic projection, a CGI entity, just a prosthetic up, makeup up actor, mm-hmm. or a legitimately old man with dementia,
or perhaps a super sophisticated in-your-face ex machina, prototype bot with a bunch with a skin suit. I mean,
I don't have any.
The point is, all of those things
are possible.
It's possible, and it also demonstrates how illegitimate that whole time period was.
But my point is, if I can believe that, and I didn't necessarily, I don't subscribe to one or the other. I think they're all interesting possibility alternatives. That doesn't go away. That suspicion that what I'm seeing and unfold go away because RFK mentions a pet activist pursuit of mine, fluoride.
Right.
Correct. Because a personal disappointment and frustration and anger at the Internal Revenue Service. They're getting their comeuppance, just because that's happening, and there might be some other positive economic windfalls as a result, doesn't mean I just suspend my suspicions and buy into. And I always have to remind myself, we are in the age of AI, mm-hmm. where this kind of fakery, when we're all screenified, right? And we're used to perceiving everything from that distant external place called the world comes through the screen, and you have multi-billionaire entities kibitzing and scheming and so on. I just don't know how much of what I see is authentic, organic behavior and action versus what is a contrivance,
A choreographed,
a preconceived, choreographed, staged presentation to get me to believe and think in a certain direction. And I wanted to play this very funny clip, which these AI tools and capabilities are now
getting pretty sophisticated.
Yeah, very sophisticated, especially if you just go back to our childhood and looked at what kind of special effects and whatnot were available to multi-million-dollar studios in the 80s and 90s. Like, this is hilarious, though. I'm going to play a clip I found on Twitter. Oh, excuse me, X. Said, who did this?
That was yours. We thought that baggie belonged to Hunter. You know, I think the Secret Service probably still has it somewhere.
I have been stealing the money.
I'm sorry, what's that now?
I must to speak honestly. I steal many of USA dollars to Ukraine, millions. Some dollars for some oligarchs also, some for American bureaucrats also.
Well, we know that, but why are you telling me this?
Because, Mr. Trump, if you end war, we cannot steal any more money. We must continue war.
No, the war must end. Your people are dying, Zelensky. They're dying.
But I want to steal more money. What do you want? Fellatio, I can do it.
No, I don't want fellatio. No.
Are you sure? I did for Biden.
Okay, that is what we call oversharing. Look, there's nothing you have that I want. You're not going to convince me to keep this war going. You don't have the cards.
I not play cards.
No, I know you're not literally playing cards. It's a metaphor. It's like I'm playing 4D chess and you're playing checkers.
No, I not play checkers. There is no checkerboard, you see.
Okay, let's try this. I am in the driver's seat, okay? Do you understand that expression?
No, but we are not in cup.
No, you're right. You're right. We're not in a car. That's true.
Listen, Mr. Trump, I am actor/comedian. I crave attention. Since start of war, I get worshipped by presidents. I'm worshipped by Hollywood. If war ends, no more attention, no more worship. With all due respect, Mr. Trump, this war must last forever.
I tell you what, if you agree to end this war, we will do a remake of Friends, and you can play Ukrainian Chandler Bing. How does that sound?
Oh, I love the Friends. This is favorite show of me. I am such a Monica.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's sign the thing, and then I'll go show you the room where Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky did it.
Oh yes, this is funny because I just say I'm such a Monica. Maybe we will go in room and you can be Bill Clinton and I will be Monica. Yes?
You know what? Forget the room. Let's just sign the document. Does anyone have a pen? Phil? Where's Phil? I need a pen. Somebody give me a damn pen.
If you're over 70 years old, you have a 60% chance to believe that 30, 40 seconds into it. It's pretty,
Yeah. I mean, it's supposed to be sort of like it looks like a dub delay or something, but the lip movements are kind of close to what's being said.
It's getting there.
It's getting pretty close.
It's getting there. But that's consumer grade stuff,
right,
is my point.
Right. And how much consent can be manufactured off of a highly convincing, screenified, top secret AI that doesn't disclose the fact that it's an AI,
right,
and generates content and people mistake it for reality? Like how close are we to that uncanny valley? Oh, perhaps we're already in it. That's what you have to question the premises under which you verify information, right? And in this era of hyper convenient, overwhelming amounts of data, that can be increasingly hard to do. People will, again, if you can't beat the screen, join the screen.
Right.
Whatever's presented on the screen must be authentic, or else it won't be on the screen. I mean, you can get into that hypnotic relay on a mass scale. And I think that that's something that we're going to have to confront and are currently in the midst of, is just this total enveloping of big data around every single facet of our lives. And, you know, again, there was no consideration for this before letting this genie out of the bottle. In all of its prior iterations, you know, whether that be the internet or the smartphone or, you know, digital money. I mean, all of this stuff is part of a broader gestalt of rendering humans as avatars.
Totally, and they're dissolving the traditional copyright system, basically, with these innovations that are useful in a lot of contexts. But one thing I wanted to bring up that happened since our last show, which we haven't had a chance to really talk about, is the whole DeepSeek AI situation, which has probably been 3-4 weeks ago now that hit.
It's been a few weeks,
but it's an interesting one. I'm sure if you're listening to this, you're familiar with what happened with DeepSeek, but the more interesting aspect to it, to me, than what you saw in the headlines, which is obviously the market reaction to it, but then, you know, oh, cheaper AI, it's less expensive than we thought, yada yada, is actually the copyright issue, because Microsoft is investigating whether they scraped ChatGPT. And what's funny about that to me is ChatGPT scraped the internet to create its initial model. And then the allegation is that DeepSeek, the Chinese, basically cheap knockoff, right? Distilled through, allegedly, distilled through access to the OpenAI APIs. I think it's called Application Protocol Interface or Program Interface. Yeah. They scraped the data, which had already been processed by Microsoft and OpenAI with all these $100 million computers. And essentially it didn't require the processing and the training and the inference that it did to begin with, because that had already been accomplished. And they somehow, again, the allegation is that the distillation process gave it that performance boost. But then you also saw this kind of very knee-jerk market reaction to just believe the Chinese that it only costs whatever $6.5 million to develop in the first place. Like, they just believed it, and then, you know, they processed their worst fear pertaining to their AI investments in the various big names in the US, and you saw this huge rout of the tech market as a result. And I thought that was hasty.
Yeah, I mean, but I guess the thing about markets now is that they are very much sort of priced to sort of a kind of high expectation. I mean, a lot of people say that it's priced to perfection or whatever because the PE ratios are through the roof, but it's trading at these crazy evaluation metrics, and the Buffett indicator. Why is he pulling nearly $500 billion out of Berkshire Holdings and keeping them in cash and T-bills? It's kind of at an all-time high. Does Buffett know something people don't? He refuses to talk about the economy, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a kind of ominous air that's like a fog over the markets right now. It's like, what's the next bad headline to upset this high order of expectations that have been sort of priced in? And I think that's because people assume that what came before is going to come again, in the sense that when Trump got in 2016, from the time he got in to when he left office, markets went up considerably. And they're expecting another Trump pump, but because there was that extra 4-year period there where there was a lot of chop, but still eventual higher prices under Biden, could we be encountering a kind of kosher disclosure Trump dump
realization
right
of reality?
And you know, that's definitely something to watch. But I do think that the disruption of this AI sort of software cheapening, I think, does hold some threat, because it's almost like these big tech companies, they're all each other's customers.
Yeah.
You know, that's how they all keep each other near $1 trillion or above $1 trillion market caps, is they're all customers of each other. You know, Microsoft purchases NVIDIA chips, and you know, that data from Microsoft, you know, Google purchases it, and you know, Apple creates devices that, you know, are able to access data from all three. And I mean, it's like they're all part of the same ultimate trend, and they don't like competition. You know, it's the whole Rockefeller maxim, you know, competition is a sin. And they want to corner AI as an energy intensive infrastructure play, so that under any kind of industrial policy that Trump, you know, appears to be kind of implementing, but it's not like, doesn't seem like it's really there in earnest yet. But that ultimately this nexus, or this consortium of big tech, will have almost sort of a perpetual advantage in the big data marketplace, if their play is sort of ensconced as the only game in town.
Right.
If they have the corner on the infrastructure and the contracts and the marketplaces, then it doesn't really, we can just edge out any sort of cheaper competitor and label it, you know, bad product.
Well, now, you know, Trump's talking about, you know, easing regulations and suggesting that they build their own power plants to power these data centers instead of jacking into the grid. Just build your own power plant. So I just wonder how long before, you know, you're not just subscribing to Microsoft Word and Teams and this and that, but you pay an electricity bill to bill.
Right.
You know.
But the thing is that's so horrible about it is, you know, people aren't being actually directly compensated for their data generation yet.
No.
And that, to me, is probably the main caveat that needs to be implemented in terms of the public interest. It's like, if you all want to build out this techno-futurist, you know, panopticon society, you know, do you really think that people are just going to indefinitely cooperate with being rendered obsolete and being brought under this
on that
obsolescence? You know, I mean, or do you have to give them carrots? You have to give the masses some kind of carrot, whether that's a UBI mechanism through data exchange, marketplace, disbursement, reimbursement kind of system. You know, maybe a sort of expiry-based coupon stimulus type stuff. I could see them implementing something like that to, again, keep people from just losing their shit because they're losing everything else. You know,
right?
And because they have to know that there is,
we got the Doge checks coming.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
It's very reminiscent of the COVID checks.
Exactly. They've already started with the whole Doge check thing.
Right.
And it's like, that's a sort of soft rollout of what Musk is a big UBI advocate. And even though in these different, you know, trial balloon small scale studies that they've done, it hasn't really elicited a whole lot of necessarily there's a lot of mixed results. You know, there's no definitive evidence that it's going to improve people's lives or even provide productivity in the broader market. But the problem is the United States is basically 80% consumer service driven economy, We don't actually have manufacturing might like we used to. Now we're better off than Germany, which has basically gutted and completely deindustrialized because of all this, climate scare legislation, Paris Accord, green tyranny stuff that's been metastasized all over Canada and the rest of the Eurozone, the UK and stuff. And it's started to take some hold here, but there's enough kind of legacy libertarian kind of ethos in America that it hasn't kind of caught hold in the same way, thankfully, because we see the results of these policies in Europe. I mean, Europe has been completely barbecued by it. So, and that's this whole weird entente stuff that they're doing with Zelensky. Going back to Zelensky, it's the new plan's the same as the old plan, right? You see Starmer and Macron trying to coach Zelensky into sort of a new meeting with Trump, where the bigger nations who are more buddy with America,
we like this guy.
We like this guy. He's okay. Just guarantee our security in this effort. You don't have to put any of your troops out there, which is what already's been happening. Just let us do the offensive. But if Russia hurts us too bad, you have to come in and help us. And it's like,
what's the difference?
What's the difference?
What's the difference?
The new plan's the same as the old plan, and it's like, the European stocks, they're getting actually like the first significant rally they've had in like half a decade on the hopes of spending on a war in these already, massively...
That's a red flag.
It's a massive warning, because the Eurozone doesn't have the chops to take on Russia. It just doesn't. It doesn't have the population. It doesn't have the morale. It doesn't have the resources. It doesn't have the weapons. It doesn't have anything.
They can't even contend with their own governments.
They're basically a giant tourist annex of America at this point. So is Canada to a great extent. And while I understand sort of like the Machiavellian like risk mashing, the game of risk as geopolitics and
right.
The big grand chessboard, so to speak, it would make sense for the Americas to sort of consolidate into sort of a grand North American Union and use Canada as this massive resource reserve and the United States as sort of the consumer hub of the Americas, and Mexico where probably a lot of the manufacturing should go.
That's the other thing.
It makes some sense on a political level, in that Europe would basically have to kind of dissolve the European Union and form a transatlantic bloc with the North American Union, because the Eurozone, I mean, it just doesn't have the teeth that a North American Union would. And that's why you hear all the talk with Greenland, buying Greenland from Denmark. This is part of this broader North American unionization. Call it anything but that.
That was another
right?
thing that came to mind since our last episode, which I've wanted to bring up with you, is that if this were 2008 or 2012, and you had a leading candidate talking about buying Greenland or merging with Canada and Mexico, what would have been the probably the minority view, but the liberty movement view would be like, oh, well, this is a clear move for the NAU and Namero and that whole agenda.
Big time.
And so
big time.
When I see this, like, to your point, I'd love to be able to travel to Greenland domestically.
Or Canada.
And Canada. I mean,
go up
why
into
not?
The Northwest
we
Territories.
share a lot of ethos and the same language with most of that country, and values. I think there's a lot of compatibility between our populations, and same with Mexico as well, except for the language thing.
Right.
And they likewise would probably like to be able to easily travel here as well. So it does make sense, but
it kind of makes some sense because you could put a lot of the manufacturing infrastructure in Mexico as part of the NAU, and there's plenty of Americans that would love to go down into Mexico, live there and do the industry and the new factories and stuff, live in the nice, equatorial climate, and there's other Americans that are more, loners and woodsy. They would love a pass to go up to the Northwest Territories and find a super cheap little plot of land.
And if they opened up homesteading laws and resource exploration,
it could be a big move because let's be honest, Canada is like 90% woods, right?
More than 90. It's
98%. You're right. The surface area that's actually populated is just on the border, basically.
Tiny,
small, and it's like
such a big country too.
It's a huge preserve, basically.
Right.
It dwarfs the preserves of the United States in terms of population. Low density preserves in Canada is just absolutely vast. So it makes sense from a geostrategic point of view, and the other thing is maybe they could keep their nationhood, but in exchange for ongoing security and lack of tariffs, it just ceases 50-60% of those preserves to the United States, and we basically have Alaska cut all the way at like a 45-degree angle down to the Great Lakes or something, and all of that is now American territory. That would make some sense, because then, and then you'd have a more, advantageous kind of relationship with the border there, and it would almost become a kind of like territory, like a U.S. territory, like Puerto Rico isn't a state, but you could make Canada into sort of a U.S. territory, because look at the population density, and it can't defend itself. All of its trade and most of its revenue is dependent on the United States. There's less than what's the population of Canada? It's got to be sub 20 million.
Let's look it up.
15 million? It's probably the size of our biggest city. Okay, so they say it's 40. All right, but that's the population of our top 3 cities.
Right.
It's between New York and LA and Chicago. That's 40. That's 40 million people.
Right.
So
that's crazy, actually.
And Canada is like basically the same size as the United States, including Alaska. And it's like, you want to solve affordability issues? Let's just merge.
Right.
If you were to treat Canada and the United States as two corporations that are, friendly, but they're still kind of competing.
Yeah.
Just have the bigger one absorb the other one.
Well, it's really not. The left thinks it's just like
evil imperialism,
aggressive invasion, and it's like he's not invading anything. He's suggesting. He's
negotiating obvious, mutually advantageous strategies.
Right, and it's like it's not the first time we've added a state to the Union.
Oh,
and
that's
see,
what we do. We're the United States, right?
They don't have an understanding of our governmental structure.
You could easily create, like, for example, like the most of Canada has about the population density of North Dakota. Let's just say. Okay. How many electoral votes does North Dakota have? Like 3, right? You could easily create 66 United States out of Canada. You just create these large, little electoral pockets that are lots of territory, but there's no population density in them. And
there's some simple process to establish statehood once you settle, because there's probably area that's not even settled, or maybe they're Inuit.
Absolutely.
Indigenous.
Actually have a bit of pioneering
spirit
and experience again,
right,
for the future generations in the Americas. I think that's a good thing. And then, honestly, you're just a hop, a skip, and a jump away from a trans-American Union, where, Brazil, they're basically the head honcho in South America, alongside, maybe Argentina. But Brazil's basically the head honcho. Now, they're a little more inimical to some of these big grand designs because they're more in cahoots with the BRICS, right?
Yeah.
Russia, India, China, and that's the other kind of side of the equation. Is like, are these tariffs really like the dawn of a golden age, or is it more like a vehicle towards dystopic brinkmanship? Because it seems like that is a more probable trajectory than a golden age. If you're isolating more, creating more trade barriers, more costs to respective populations, putting more of the bill on the everyday consumer, is that really a golden age tactic, or is that more of a brinkmanship tactic? I mean, it seems like it's more the latter, where it's like, oh, you dare me? I'm going to play chicken. Basically, you want to play a game of chicken,
right?
I've got the tank, and you've got the Mazda Miata. All right, ready, set, go. Mazda Miata's like tailing it the other direction,
right?
The tank is just chasing the Miata. That's the kind of game of chicken that Trump wants to play, and to an extent, he may have that. All these nations could just capitulate.
I was trying to find it.
It's possible.
I was trying to find it because it was in one of his first Oval Office, taking questions from the press things the first week he was in, and he was asked about BRICS, and he was like, yeah, these countries, they want to try something cute. I don't even know, is China part of BRICS? I don't even know.
Yeah.
Of course, there's an obvious C in BRICS. So
Right.
that was like an underhanded, insult, basically, that this little alliance that they have, like, oh yeah, that'll be finished. And it's like,
Right.
how long have we been hearing about BRICS this, BRICS that? And, one way or the other, the shit's getting shaken up. And I want to be optimistic, and I do like to think about these possibilities, especially when all I hear is like negative. Oh, he's gonna take over Canada and he's bullying our allies and shit like that. I'm like, come on, we've been bullied too.
Well, yeah, it's like we've been footing everyone's bill basically for decades.
Insane when you actually look at the dollars and
Right.
cents of it, like
It's
with
crazy.
our contribution to NATO and World Health Organization,
Yeah, all of it.
and I don't even need to go over the line items because it's popular knowledge at this point. But the USAID stuff, I mean, people should
just
be
tip of the iceberg.
People should be outraged.
It's tip of the iceberg too. I mean, and
especially when it's juxtaposed with this parasitic IRS that,
Right.
and that's one thing that I've loved, and maybe Palantir told him to say it because there's a lot of people who love it too.
Right.
But it's been fascinating to see him talk about abolishing the IRS, the income tax,
woo.
and changing it from the Internal Revenue Service to the External Revenue Service. Because that's something that, we've talked about Payman Motahede before and his work to expose that what people been tricked to think that they are internal revenue generators, that their revenue is internal and therefore taxable. And he's like, actually, if you look at the definitions, you are foreign to the jurisdiction that they're saying, which is the District of Columbia. And that's why statehood and how we're organized is like super important to understand. It is kind of mind-blowing to think about, they created this 10 square mile area called District of Columbia. It's not a state, but it is the head of the federal government. People think of the federal government as like superior to the states, but it's actually the other way around. It's like the only reason the Fed exists is because the states formed a union around the Bill of Rights, which is being violated today by the existence of the feds.
Absolutely.
So they're even less than inferior. They should be considered a foreign enemy to the original purpose of our union, which was the preservation of rights.
Well, right. I mean, if you want to get it right down to that brass tacks, the development of the fiat money system goes hand in hand with the ballooning of the size of government, because within a fiat money system, it doesn't matter who is spending the money and who's generating the money. It just has to be generated and spent.
That's one of the more fascinating things that Elon I didn't mean to take such a huge shit on Elon, because he does say a lot of and they're coming out with things that I mean, you and I would say if they came out, oh yeah, like we knew that was true, like, just common sense would tell you.
Right.
But now it's part of the national conversation. And like we've known, it's been kind of, the left would call it a conspiracy theory or just internet like gossip, basically. Even though Donald Rumsfeld said 10, 20 years ago that the Pentagon misplaced some trillions of dollars, and like he's basically like, the government has a magic money machine and the checks never bounce. It's like this very esoteric black magic type system that was developed and has been implemented, and the whole world has been subject to it. The world reserve currency, I've mentioned it on past shows. I've never forgotten the time I was on an airline in China, and they were playing for all their passengers this documentary about how they lent a bunch of gold to the Federal Reserve in the early part of America's history. Well, not the early 1900s,
right,
to create a world reserve currency, and they were supposed to get all this economic development
right
out of the loan that they gave them, but instead they got this years and years. Yes, they did get eventually a lot of like industrial development through the offshoring process, but they also are at this point our biggest creditor. They're lending aggression and lending money to us to consume goods that they don't need to sell us. They can just sell it to themselves and prosper as
well, but that would mess up their whole currency devaluation scheme, which is a way of exploiting the dollar-denominated system worldwide. Because there's actually more dollar-denominated debt amongst other countries in the aggregate than there are dollar-denominated debt.
So they find themselves in the web, and there are certain benefits to the web that they enjoy.
Exactly.
And they, like a drug addict, can't find a way to kind of get off of it without some sort of major conflagration. But Elon's talking about the treasury payment system and how there's no categorization code, there's no descriptions, it's totally untraceable, blank checks. The checks never bounce. It's just the money just seems to always go out.
It's perpetual.
And the society kind of had that epiphany during COVID, when they gave you the stimmy check, and it's like, oh, I just give you my bank details and this digital money just appears. Like, where did it come from?
Well, and the thing that's so, I think, kind of two-faced, or at least selective, it's kind of a selective enforcement, right? Because this whole Department of Government Efficiency, it's going after kind of the low-hanging fruit, right? When in reality, we don't actually know dollar for dollar the full outflow into all of these different departments and black budgets and intelligence apparatuses and just the sort of tributary effect that goes out, the velocity of the money in all its different veins and where it all goes. We actually don't have a full understanding of that, but they're attempting to sort of create a sort of system where you can monitor that. The problem is it's only directed at low-hanging fruit, right?
You gotta start somewhere.
all of the big mega corporations basically got their start with government largesse, fraud, and secretive spending budgets, right? So if you really wanted to, give it to the man, or, make things more efficient, you would actually force those big corporations to pay in mass dividends to the treasury that would then be dispersed to the people, because all of its seed money came, or a lot of it came from, NQTEL and CIA, experimental investment ventures, and
DARPA grants,
and shadowy angel investors and stuff that were affiliated with prior administrations and other iterations of the intelligence communities. So those are all public funds. So how come you're not going after the main corporate superstructure that makes all of the money,
right,
and taking a government efficiency cleaver to that? Oh, because y'all are actually part of that faction within the state that wants to take over the entire kit and caboodle.
That's a good point, because I've noticed this meme passed around in leftist circles, which frustrates the hell out of me.
Right. Again, it's like they get like 3/4 of the way there to actually making a decent criticism, and then it just, the last 25% is just schlock, and it just completely dilutes their prior point. Yeah.
And you've probably seen it a number of times. It's like, pictures of the world's richest men or whatever, and it says, like, if you just taxed the billionaires by 2%, it could solve, it was like, replace the nation's piping system. Okay, probably not. Solve homelessness and hunger, and maybe one other thing. And I was like,
month.
I was like, can I see can I see the math on that? And then number two, like, it's so devoid of economic integrity, this kind of meme. I get where they're coming from.
Yeah, oh, sure.
I get where they're coming from, because
the obvious disparities and
you see the
double standards and corruption and stuff. Of course,
you see the disparity. You see these billionaires, the golden parachutes, the golden handcuffs,
plunge protection team,
the insider trading, the manipulation, and there's plenty of fingers to point in number of directions. Like, in the political class is guilty too, of insider trading. Oh, by the way, they wrote the laws on insider trading, and it's really for you and not for them.
Right.
Okay, I get all that.
Absolutely.
But number one, 2% of the billionaires, like, okay, 2% of what?
Right.
These people keep their money in, like, industries and
real estate,
stocks and equities and real estate. And so what are you saying exactly? 2% on their net worth annually? So they will have to liquidate
compound?
They'll have to liquidate
right
assets to pay I would say an arbitrary, it's just a, what do you call that? Like a wealth tax? Like, you won the game of wealth generation for yourself. So we're going to levy this 2% tax just because we feel like you have too much. Like, it's.
Yeah, I understand this sort of moral hazard there. Although I kind of understand the idea behind, like, a net worth cap where anyone can sort of generate up into a certain point, but then any excess beyond that kind of gets put into sort of a distributist queue of things that need to be paid for. I kind of understand that sort of thought experiment there, where who needs more than $10 billion? Like, let's be honest,
right? But then it becomes, where do you draw the line?
10 billion. I mean, I feel like that's kind of a fair cap.
A billion. I mean,
well, a billion. I'd say 10 billion is probably a good. It's arbitrary, but at the same time, you think about the aggregate money supply, right? And then if you had an equal distribution, just as a thought experiment, right? Sort of the pinnacle Aristotelian. There's only a giant middle class. And the elites and the very impoverished are on these massive tails of a huge bell curve. That's not really the system we have right now, though. You know, if we have more of like a pinnacle system, it's not really a bell curve, where so much of the wealth is aggregated in the top 1%, that the base, while it's massively spread out and there are tails, it's kind of, it doesn't resemble a curve. You know, it's more of like a giant monolith, like a super spire with a huge base, with like, you know, a dais basically. Because I mean, so in other words, if you were to create essentially a true pyramid scheme, right, out of the excess wealth generated from the billionaire class, you could burgeon the middle class.
Sure.
You could expand the size and scope and prominence of the middle class after about a decade. That's certainly true. I understand that line of argument. Now, you know, the free trade capitalists will gripe about that, but if you were to actually do an experiment where there was a wealth cap of $10 billion and any excess revenue that was generated for that went towards public works, right? For example, just as a thought experiment.
Sure.
And that those monies were transparently tracked, and they were verified and actually went into the proper accounts, and people saw the compound collective benefit of that. After a decade, you'd have less of a wealth disparity.
Sure. And as a society, I mean, not current generation, but our country, we have accepted this idea of busting disproportionate disparity in the form of the robber barons, but that's actually a false history that we were taught, because and it has to be false, and there's legitimate evidence that it was false. But even if there wasn't backroom deals and foundations that came out of the robber baron era, you see the fruits of it, which is a growing disparity. There's no way that the robber barons were busted.
No.
They actually further consolidated.
Yeah,
and then you look at the Federal Reserve and the private shareholders therein.
They just went into different markets, and they just basically broke up their monopolies, and then went into different subsidiaries, and then reconsolidated, and then aggregated their wealth from the consolidation into a new controlled venture that went around the antitrust. That's why they got rid of McKinley to a great extent, because he was trying. He did a really good job of pointing out the moral hazard that the robber barons had generated throughout the 19th century. But that's why they knocked him out. Is he was going to go full on with the. He was actually had the earliest, one of the earlier iterations of a industrial policy that had tariffs against these big players in railroad and all of this. The antitrust movement was kind of kicked off, or at least really brought to national prominence under McKinley, but. We saw what happened to him, and he's the one of the assassination that people know least about, to a great extent. It's not taught very much in schools as to, they like to pass it off as not a hit job, right? But I think that if you look at the guy's policies and his thinking on how to organize the society for more of the advantage of the general public, I mean, can't have that at the dawn of the 20th century. The robber barons had other plans, right? They had bigger fish to fry than contending with an uppity public that saw the moral hazard of excess wealth hoarding. They wanted to quash that quickly and normalize.
Yeah, before
hoarding.
this industrial revolution got out of hand.
Exactly.
Well, let's take a quick break. We're a little bit past halfway through episode 52 of the Zetitic Newscast. We unfortunately haven't had any call-ins, but I did forget to mention that we are accepting callers. The toll-free number is 202-800-1829. That's 202-800-1829. Call in for your chance to win 444 tfuel as a participation award. We'd love to hear your comments, questions, or other topics that you think would be really important to discuss on tonight's show. We're going to take a quick bio break, and I'll play some music in the background while we we take a moment, and then we'll come back and finish the rest of tonight's show. Thank you guys for joining, and we'll be back shortly.
Forbes called us best online for options trading. Investopedia, best for options trading, period. With stockbrokers.com, we're #1 for options and futures trading. The Motley Fool really likes us. And so does Business Insider. So what else can we say other than, boom, trading like a trader. Tasty Trade. Make your move.
right, we're back with the remainder of episode 52 of the ZTitic Newscast. We're your host, Dave and Xavier Diamant. If you're listening live and you're interested in participating for your chance to win 444 tfuel, please call the toll-free number 202-800-1829. Weigh in on anything we're talking about, anything we've talked about, or anything you want to talk about for your chance to win. And Xavier and I were just taking a bio break and chit-chatting. Maybe you caught some hot mic takes, I'm not sure, but I was just bringing up a conversation I came across on my Nextdoor app, which, if you're not familiar, is like a community neighborhood social media app. It has a bunch of problems, but I do have a persona on there to monitor, what is being talked about. And I saw a post on there today about someone nearby me complaining about the recent the tax assessment that took place here in Durham, North Carolina, because they're talking about like a 71% increase in some cases in their tax value. And
fraud.
You had sent me, and I meant to bring this up on one of the last 2 or 3 shows, but I failed to. This guy who has been doing investigative journalism on this subject of appraisal fraud.
Mitch Vexler, yeah.
And, it's a very apropos subject, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out with the new administration, if there's any light shed on this issue, because what people are finding across the country, it's not just in our area, that the tax values of their property are skyrocketing, and yet, we still have this like real estate market which is largely inflated, and it seems like they're trying to just piggyback on that reinflated bubble and kind of encourage it in a way, creating a false sense of rising property values to grift off more taxes. And I want to play at least couple minutes of this, at least the intro of this video you sent me. Is this the guy you were talking about? Mm-hmm. Mitch Vexler. Yeah. So folks, listen to this.
You're a whistleblower.
Yeah. This whole thing.
You're uncovering something pretty big. You're a whistleblower.
Yeah. This whole thing is a scam. The government and the taxing entities themselves and the state comptroller, they're literally equity stripping mom and pop's money. This is a criminal conspiracy to defraud. They flipped the equity out of people's houses into a tax by virtue of hyperinflating the single family homes. That's the point that I'm trying to get out, to make everybody understand. Your money is being stolen. Your equity is being stripped. And the problem is you can't see it. Freddie and Fannie have commanded the appraisers to commit fraud, or they don't get the next appraisal job, or they get fired on the spot in order to hit the target. And it all starts off with one simple fact, that no appraisal district that we have seen yet is adhering to uniform standards of professional appraisal practice. You signed an oath. When you violate that oath, that's a third-degree felony. It is not discretionary. It's mandatory. People that sit on those boards in those taxing entities also signed an oath. Think of all the people that in reality should be in jail over this. There's no way out of this. They're caught. This is a mess. It's quantifiable. Once the market, the bond world wakes up and sees this, they're going to exit for the doors, and this thing will come crashing down. And I mean a greater depression.
Love the globe meteor. But yeah, I mean, this whole thing is like an hour and 20 minutes. He goes into all the details that he's uncovered and what they've been doing to expose this. But that intro perfectly summarizes the subject, and it's something that, as a homeowner myself, like, you notice right away. Your jurisdiction will send you a letter asking for updates to the property that you supposedly own, hey, do you own any boats? Literally, this is a question on the one local to me. Yeah, you own any boats on the property? I'm like, are you serious? What business of that is yours? What have you done to upgrade or add value? You know, we're doing our reassessment. We need to make sure we're collecting and it should naturally cause a lot of people to question the whole institution to begin with.
Oh, I mean, property taxes in their current iteration are almost pretty much entirely unconstitutional in the way that it's being implemented, because it's essentially a tax on unrealized gains. Right? It's you're using a nominal index and comps in the area of what other homes that aren't yours sold for. Therefore, it artificially balloons the value of your present home as though you're an active seller and you're getting ready to sell it. But if you're planning to live there for another decade, it doesn't. You're not seeing those nominal gains in the market. If your property, if you're in like a 3% or sub 3% mortgage, you're not looking to sell because you can't find an equivalent with the same payment anywhere.
Right.
So it's nominal froth that's being leveraged against you, the homeowner.
Right. Now we saw Kamala planning to institute, of course she lost the election, but planning to institute 25% tax on unrealized capital gains of wealthiest Americans. What's the problem with unrealized capital gains tax, Xavier? What's the problem?
Well, because
we got to get those billionaires.
Well, I mean, if the market in which the capital gains are being allocated is manipulated, for example, then there's a conflict of interest within the taxing entity to constantly allow for ever escalating tax increases.
What would be why would anybody assess it lower unless you had a bunch of hurricanes come through or fires and directed energy weapons?
Those are certainly apropos events that have happened recently that certainly do affect property values. But I mean, the problem with unrealized capital gains tax is that, okay, if you were to implement that, then there's every incentive for everyone to
be as poor as
possible.
Yeah. I actually know some people who sell their cryptos to pay what they think they owe.
Tax loss harvesting.
Right. On like, I staked Theta and I earned tfuel, which is income. And, people are selling to pay what they think they owe when the assets they're selling are not even at the levels they were when they bought it.
Right.
Because they think that they owe a tax on staking.
Right.
And then unrealized, it's not even money that you have yet.
Yeah, it's not real.
Whereas, like, at least with staking,
right?
You could make the argument,
right?
Or like rent income. Of course, I contest the idea that the government has a seat at the table when I'm a landlord and someone's paying me rent. Like, why should they get a cut of the rent money? Which is essentially what you're saying when you think that staking income is income that's taxable.
Right.
You had nothing to do with the generation or the operation that led to the income in the first place, but yet you want. But I guess I'm supposed to thank the military, and because that's what it goes to some black hole that somehow benefits me, and that's the social contract.
I mean,
but unrealized capital gains is the most insane because it's not even money in hand.
Right.
Whereas at least with staking, that's technically money in hand that you could like look at or move around,
But because of the
rent money, for example.
But because of the commercial real estate apocalypse that's impending, I mean, a lot of stuff comes up for refinancing this year. So expect ongoing, bumpiness on the fundamentals within commercial real estate. But because they're not receiving the same sort of taxpayer contribution from these big commercial operations,
squeeze the single family home,
squeeze the residential market. And that's what's happening because these municipalities have an ever increasing budget, right? They have to constantly increase the amount of money that's coming into the municipality. It's a conflict of interest, right? So they have every incentive to manipulate the numbers, fudge the practices, and engage in kind of creative accounting work to justify what's ultimately a backdoor tax on unrealized gains when it comes to property assessment. And just like what Mitch was saying, I mean, these are not the whole uniform standards and practices. These officials are supposed to uphold that, but when you have outfits like Zillow, for example, that will just instantaneously update the nominal value of a property based on a bid of a buyer that may or may not, or a seller that may or may not sell or buy, all of a sudden you have this kind of Ponzi within real estate that's all about keeping nominal values escalating,
right? Even
though the fundamentals of a property defies that. I mean, it's almost like it's this priced for high expectations. We're supposed to value real estate as though the occupant or the owner is constantly putting in diamond studded floors and platinum refrigerator and titanium roof or something.
The crazy thing is, any renovations that I did, I paid a sales tax on every material and labor that went into that, and those laborers, they pay an income tax on the wages that they got from me.
And then at the end of the day, it's the banks that make all the money on just the financialization of the asset.
And then the only thing that I can palpably benefit from a property tax that goes to something I might enjoy is the public school system. That's it.
Yeah.
Now I happen to have chosen to do homeschooling, and of course I don't get to keep any of that money that's sent to that for my own purposes.
Right.
That just goes into the collective pool. But in the jurisdiction I talked about, where people were complaining on next door, it's Durham, North Carolina. They also have a $7 million budget shortfall.
Oh,
so despite this squeezing of the single family homes and the taxpayer and the increasing tax rates and insurance rates and all of that, they have a budget shortfall. They just can't seem to get enough, and that it seems almost by design.
Yep. Why would they ever report that they had a surplus? Right? Why would they ever say that they had a surplus, even if it was the case that they did? Why not just say it's still a shortfall?
Right.
I mean, it's obvious fraud.
So basically, you already spend too much. You wanted to spend.
You're already bankrupt.
You already spent more. You want to spend more than you are going to spend, but what you are going to spend is too much for what we get.
Right. Right, and then think about this, okay, how does a homeowner actually benefit from escalating real estate nominal values? The only way that they can benefit is by refinancing and getting a home equity line of credit, which is just bank leverage against your asset.
It's insane.
And so you can't benefit from increasing real estate values unless you sell the home,
right,
or you hawk out based on these nominal rates,
right,
a line of credit.
Right, exactly. Which is duplicating the money supply, essentially.
100%.
Yeah.
And then that's a big reason why there's been this conflict of interest to keep prices in a lofty zone, is so that it provides this backdoor Cantillon effect, essentially, where the money supply is generated off of the duplication of the monies based on the nominal assessed increased value of the home, and that person gets to spend in the economy. Meanwhile, they're actually incrementally being equity stripped out of their position, because that's the only way that you can take advantage of escalating real estate if you don't plan on moving. So that's why it's unrealized. It's a backdoor unrealized capital gains tax, which is unconstitutional.
Right.
The home owners don't benefit from escalating home prices unless they're basically cash investors who have massive deep pockets and can just swoop in and buy up whole blocks or whole neighborhoods that are, you know, in financial distress, cash for keys, and then they turn around and put, you know, cheap labor and materials into, you know, upfitting the properties a little bit, and then they can then cash in on carpetbaggers from other areas coming in and, you know, putting down larger deposits.
Actually taking out the loan to pay those inflated, but
exactly. And then so that investor can take advantage of rising real estate prices in that way, but that's less than 5% of the market. So the way that they're trying to say that, oh, well, you know, you're getting so much wealthier. Look at the Case-Shiller index. You know, the nominal prices of houses are just going up and up and up. They're going to go up forever.
Yeah.
Where have we heard this before?
Real estate 2007.
Yeah, I mean, it basically feels like, yeah, the beginning of 2007 or the end of 2006 right now in the real estate market, which means this bubble could maybe kick it one last little standard deviation higher before the volume is literally zero. The only transactions that are happening is BlackRock.
I've stopped being surprised that they've been able to kick the can this long, and now I'm just resigned to kicking until it doesn't. And then when that day comes, I'll be like, okay, it's finally here.
Finally.
The reckoning. I wish the Band-Aid was pulled off in 2008 and we've been able to recover by now from that, you know, and we'd be in a much better position. But yeah, we got a bunch of parasites who
or even during COVID, it wasn't allowed to fully crash either.
Right.
You know, because of all this stimmies.
It's amazing.
Because if that stimulus hadn't entered the market, you wouldn't have a real estate bubble.
If you had a magic money machine, I mean, you can clearly see how intoxicating.
Oh God.
That kind of power would be. That's why it's so hard to like unseat this power.
Right.
Is because who would want to give that up? It's like having a genie in a bottle
with infinite wishes.
It's insane.
Yeah.
We only have another 50 minutes or so, and I want to continue moving through different topics. I meant to sort of bring this up, but there just wasn't a good moment when we were talking about the Elon stuff, our space pornographer
in chief,
who, you know, just no secret propulsion technology. Because there was another big
nothing to see here
event that happened recently since our last show, and that's we landed on the moon again.
Oh, of course.
We landed on the moon again, Xavier. It's a Texas company, Fireflies, Blue Ghost, and I just want to play this clip from ABC News. I'm a little surprised they've brought out the gold aluminum foil machine again. You know, this same design. It really hasn't evolved that much since the Apollo missions movie. But check this out.
That historic landing in the works for the Blue Ghost spacecraft, looking to touch down on the moon in less than 24 hours now, as we look to understand more about it and pave the way for more space exploration. Take a look. This morning, stunning images from Firefly's Blue Ghost lunar lander as it prepares for a nerve-wracking landing on the moon's surface.
We're a little bit wider and we're a little bit shorter than most other lunar landers that you'll see. And it really is to kind of guarantee that
The
we have a
aluminum
really
foil
nice,
mobile.
soft, upright landing on the lunar surface.
Others have tried and failed, like Astrobotics Peregrine. iSpace landed with mixed results, and Intuitive Machines Odysseus landed with a bent leg. But because these are commercial companies, they have a little more flexibility to take risks that eventually can get us to Mars.
That fish
The
island.
moon is a great stepping stone towards that goal and vision. It's all interrelated.
Tonight, Blue Ghost will have a nail-biting descent onto the moon's south pole, where scientists believe we will find water, critical for the future of space exploration.
We'll give the go, no go to do our powered descent initiation burn, which will then start the burn with the main engine and the reaction control thrusters. And from then on, it's pretty much all automatic until we land. We can no longer abort, and we have prepared the spacecraft to land on the moon automatically to mitigate any other risks.
Once Blue Ghost lands, dozens of experiments begin.
We'll operate for an entire lunar day, which is about 14 Earth days. And that's when all of our payloads kind of start their mission.
So the images you saw flying over it, that was the far side of the moon that it captured. It's going to land on the near side of the moon. Okay. They hope to land a lander there on the far side next year. But
wow,
really cool.
That's where there could be water.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. That's right.
Really cool, guys. I'm surprised the Hollywood movie magic, they haven't gotten much more sophisticated.
It's pathetic.
Since is it a, like we talked about Joe Biden's presidency being sort of a humiliation ritual.
Mm-hmm.
Is that where we're at with the current space pornography industry?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we got Jeff Bezos's space dick,
Richard Branson.
the Tesla, you know, Tesla, which is part of our introduction, by the way. If you guys didn't notice, there's different clips of the Tesla guy who's floating out in space, which was like almost intentionally, like, where did that green screen footage come from where you see the flip? Was that somebody like recording the feed? You know what I'm talking about, where it's like the Tesla car that's going to be launched into space,
right?
And you know, you see the world behind it and everything. And there was this video that came out where for a split second it appeared that the Tesla car was in a studio with a green screen in the background.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Did somebody, like, was that on the live feed and somebody just caught it by chance? Or
That's a good question. But I mean, it's so ironic because, you know, we started with Musk on Rogan saying, "Oh, this is nothing to see here.
Right.
I do amazing rockets. Oh, the resolution on UFOs is so low. Why doesn't it improve?" And then this is the guy with the whole Tesla ad campaign saying, "Oh, you can tell it's real by how fake it looks."
Right.
That's Elon Musk. That's a quote from Elon Musk. And it's quite obvious this whole launch the Tesla in space was movie magic, right? It's like very obvious. But because he's a huckster, he just kind of laughs it off and is pandering to the ignorance of people thinking that this guy is an actual expert about a fictional environment. You know, the main thing that has to be said about Musk is this guy is a techno charlatan. I mean, he's engaged in a lot of pseudoscientific big state enterprises that really no one else within the elite wants to really defend and take on. So he's definitely a prized puppet. That's why he's so front and center right now, is that he's taken on a lot of focus and a lot of heat.
Actually, this just occurred to me as I was listening to you. So I don't think I've appreciated it until just right now, that his overseeing of Doge, his stewardship of Tesla, which people have a very tactile experience with, if they've ever owned or driven one. They've at least seen them. They're out and about, so it's very real for them.
It's a symbol of prestige.
Yeah, and he, if what he says is true and what I read on Wikipedia is true, that he's like SpaceX is the number one provider of commercial space launches. Kind of like maybe they were feeling the heat a little bit on the space fraud front, and like the existence of ztitic.news is a
drop in the bucket.
Is a drop in the bucket, but it signifies that the public sentiment, and there are much more popular examples we could give. You've got the Eric Dubé phenomenon, the shit nearby us in Cary. There was the worldwide flat Earth conference. The Dave the Flat Earth guy and the Jeranism and like these different channels and personalities are coming out of the woodwork, and they're getting people to question, as well as even older content. There was a strange thing that happened on the moon documentary, and I mean, really, NASA has never been immune from cynics and skeptics looking at what they're doing and questioning it. Like moon landing conspiracy theories, so to speak, have been around since it happened. I think,
and arguably in terms of bureaucratic bloat and just like wasteful expenditure, look no further than NASA, right? I mean, you would think that if there was an honest department and government, was like, do we really need to be spending $60 million a day to get?
What do we really get for it?
What are we really getting for this?
GPS? That's what you're going to tell me, even though that's a ground-based technology masquerading as a satellite technology.
Right.
Otherwise, how come when I get in an airplane and there's no clouds, I can't get a GPS signal?
Right.
So I would be more visible to the satellite.
Should be.
If I'm visible to a satellite sitting in my office on the ground with my window nearby, why would I not be more visible in an airplane by the window to a GPS signal? People just assume because global positioning system. Right. It's these satellites, like in our intro. We're all this shit is floating around in orbit around the globe. And this is why do we? Okay, this is making me mad now. Like, why do we pay however much it is, $50 billion a year to NASA? And I know it's a drop in the bucket. There's frauds everywhere, but like this is pretty key from a psychological perspective. Because of satellites, because space exploration, and it's like, well, what have I gotten from it? Right. What have when we went to the moon, we invented Velcro, and I'm like, dude, we don't. What is the return on investment for Velcro? Like, come on.
Exactly.
So many nebulous purported benefits.
It's good for the exploratory spirit of mankind. That's priceless.
But I just want to dispel the whole GPS, because like that's the only. It's like when I reveal myself to be a quote tax protester. People, don't you like roads? Don't you like schools? Rising tides raises all boats. Am I right? And I'm like, I ever have to go over this again? Like. The roads are not paid for with the taxes I'm talking about.
False equivalence.
Same deal here. Like, you don't like NASA? Well, if we didn't have NASA, we wouldn't have landed on the moon. I'm like, what did that ever do for me?
Hasn't done anything.
What did it do for me?
Hasn't done anything for anyone except giving them a nice fairy tale cosmology.
Even if it's true, what did it do for me? I question it. I don't think they did it.
It made you feel a lot smaller, and you had to put extra faith in the space cowboy industrial complex. Yeah.
But then, what about GPS? That proves satellites exist, and I'm like, okay, I just wanted to dispel that. But another video along these lines I wanted to play. And
it's like, you would think with all this NASA funding, we would have deflation in the space travel market by now. Right?
Well, that's what Elon talked about on JRE, was the great innovations. He goes into all this minutia and detail about the challenges from an engineering point of view in building a reusable, rocket that can be quickly turned around, because why launch a rocket every 2 days? Like, we need to cut the cost of space travel, by 100x, and we believe we're right on the precipice. It's like, man, you motherfuckers are always on the precipice. We're always 2 weeks away from a meteor destroying us,
right?
Or landing on the moon and establishing,
terraforming Mars.
Except for this whole, this is a whole nother subject, but like these astronauts that are stuck in space right now, and Elon's going to go rescue them.
Absolute farce.
I'm like, this is a Hollywood script.
It's a script.
It's a Hollywood script.
It's pretty apparent to people who know the history of charlatanry. And it's very sophisticated, and it rides on ad populum, social proof fallacy. No one's going to be the one who questions the genius innovator. Oh, you're stupid. You don't. If you're so smart, how come you're not rich like Elon? I mean, that's the kind of hand wavium that they're peddling.
On the other side of that is, people who are like, he's a scam artist, and Trump is a scam artist, and they're idiots, and I'm like,
it's like, okay,
there's
now unpack that to where it's actually a sound criticism.
Right.
Most people won't. They'll be, oh, Donald Trump is mean, and
he got $1 million loan from his dad, and Elon he never created anything from scratch.
And he made a hand gesture that reminds me of a bad guy.
These are the kind of
lowest common denominator critiques. There are legitimate critiques to be made
about these guys,
and it's just like, I wish I wasn't brought into this kind of petty, high schoolish form of criticism. I would like to raise the bar a little bit to more legitimate terms.
Well, but then that's the whole Agent Smith effect, right? The second you try to do that, oh, you're just trying to be smart.
Yeah.
And it's like they shut themselves down, knowing that they prefer the low resolution, scripted garbage.
I know you run into that a lot because you're always trying to be smart. You just trying to be smart over there, Xavier?
I mean, I'm trying to share some of my
Is there
research.
anything wrong with trying to be smart?
Right. Yeah, everyone has been coaxed into this sort of race to the bottom ethos, right? Where, you used a 4-syllable word that I've never heard. Therefore, you're just trying to be smart.
That's what's word salad.
I had an elementary school friend.
I hate that one.
Yeah.
They'll use it about anything that they just don't
understand. Yeah. It's an insecurity lashing out projection, basically. But I had a friend in elementary school, and as we grew older, I moved, like maybe double the distance from his house, which was, I was probably 1,000 yards from his house, like walking distance to his. So I moved to another part of the neighborhood, and we just kind of didn't hang out as much. And then when we did reconnect, you grow fast at that age, and we had grown apart a little bit, and he, I expressed disappointment that we didn't see each other as much, and I wish we could hang out more. And he's like, well, you moved across the neighborhood, and it's a farther walk, and we're different, like you read the dictionary, and my vocabulary, not that I have like the biggest vocabulary, but compared to him, I guess it like made him feel like we weren't compatible or something. And I was like, I don't think I'm better than you or anything like that. And like if I don't know a word, I do read the dictionary. Like that's nothing to be ashamed of, you know? It's like, oh, I bet you like to read, huh?
Right.
There's that, like, why aren't you gonna be ignorant like me? You know, kind of. There is a vein of thought out there.
That's like that.
Yeah, that wants you to kind of join their own
If you
ignorance.
can't beat them, join them.
Yeah.
You're never going to be able to make me into a smarter person. Just become dumb like me, man.
You know, and that's just sort of a simplification of terms. But I mean, that is the anti-intellectualism that is pretty much everywhere now. If you question mainline, mainstream shibboleths, well, you're just word salad. It's this
or like they won't
throw away.
They won't levy
culture,
any. They won't levy or wage an argument against the subject matter.
Not at all.
They will couch your conviction in the subject matter or the point you're making as some sort of display of superiority, and then just write it all off as like some sort of personality defect. Like you're an asshole, or you're an elitist, or you're this, or you're that, or they have infinite number of categorizations.
Which is, it's all that is ad hominem and appeal to emotion, basically.
Right.
I mean, that's all that is. But we've been dumbed down as a society to think that, oh, that's such a great comeback, man. That's such a good zinger. Yeah, you called him out for talking crazy. What's that idiocracy? Yeah, you talk like a faggot, man.
Right.
I mean, that's basically where we're at with that.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
That perfectly distills what we're talking about.
And that idiocracy clip, I mean, there are so many parallels of that movie that have already come true. We're actually past.
We're not in the AI era. We're in the Brondo era right now.
Brondo AI. That's gonna be the next AI, guys. It's Brondo AI.
We kind of gotten off track. I initially brought up the aluminum, the pinnacle of our space exploration technology, which hasn't. I think the only facelift it got was a gold spray tan, probably courtesy of Donald Trump's Space Force, because we know how he loves gold and we know how he loves his spray tan.
Bingo.
On the lunar lander, some company in Texas, whatever. And I wanted to also play this clip. It was posted in the official ZTIDIC News Telegram. I just watched it today. I can't remember when it was posted, but it's pretty interesting when we get on the subject of the moon and Space Force and the cosmology of the Earth and so on and so forth. I haven't seen this docuseries. Have you? It's called The Flatlanders.
I've seen excerpts of it. I need to probably watch the whole thing.
Yeah, me as well.
It doesn't. From what I've seen, it doesn't give me any groundbreaking new revelations. But it's further confirmation and documentation of the kind of.
Did you post this?
I didn't specifically post this one, but I've seen this clip before.
So these are, I guess, air traffic control, radar operators. I'm not sure their background. I'm sure it's covered in the docuseries, but this is pretty cool. Check this out.
By the rate of Doppler change that those signals come back, we can actually gauge the speed of that aircraft. Some of the things that I witnessed that were very interesting about radar is that we would be able to track aircraft all the way down to the ground, and I do mean all the way down to the ground at distances of around 100 miles. And now that I know the calculation curvature, 100 miles is 6,666 feet of curvature, of drop. That is literally impossible because radar works at microwave frequencies, 2 to 6 gigahertz or even higher, anywhere in the microwave spectrum, and it is absolutely reliant on it being line of sight, meaning if you can't see it, it don't work. When you take into consideration that we're able to track aircraft from whatever altitude they're coming in at all the way down to the ground at a target 100 miles away, and knowing that that target should be 6,000 plus foot below the curvature, that kind of eliminates the ball model.
Well, you know, in air traffic control, they have two different types of radar. There's a short range, but airport-based radar goes out to 60 miles. And then for the long flights and high altitude and off coast, it can go out to, it's en route radar, and it can be 200 miles. So they can detect targets 200 miles away. So in radar, the point is it has to be able to have a direct line to the airplane. So with regards to the shape of the Earth, I never thought about it as I worked for 24 years. You didn't say, wait a minute, I think that target is too low for me to see at that distance. Nobody ever even thinks about that. But in reality, now knowing what must be if we live on a ball, the fact is that at even just 180 miles, any airplane below 26,000 feet, if the radar can see it, the Earth is not a ball, period. End of story. And does that happen very often? 1,000 times plus a day. 1,000 times plus a day, somebody calls up, somebody coming from offshore. There's a whole class of aircraft that are not pressurized. They can't fly above 11,000 feet. The pilot will pass out. So they operate at and below 10,000 feet, no matter what, and no matter what the weather is. They just can't operate up there. And there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of these airplanes still operating all the time. And so they'd be coming in at 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 feet from like Bermuda or beyond and say 180 miles from Miami. And I said, Roger. And every time they do that, they prove the Earth is flat. And they don't know it, but it's absolute undeniable proof. 26,000, and at 200 miles, 29,000. I mean, there's a lot of commercial flights are never at 29,000 coming in from 200 miles out. So, over and over.
Pretty damning.
Yeah, because it's a practical implementation that's used every day. Now, the only gripe I would have is just the labeling flat Earth, right? Because flat can exist on this wall,
right?
The
scale.
It's all, and also Earth is a pre-programmatic term that conjures associations in the mind. We've dealt with this, but it is absolute mathematical, empirical, professional proof of a non-spherical level realm. That's true, because the whole sphericity calculation is
it disproves the presupposition of the 26,000 mile
correct
circumference Earth, or whatever the exact number is immaterial. They've done the math, and
that's why the whole,
even if there's a margin of error of,
it's not that big of an error.
It's not that big of an error.
No. And I mean, if you look at all of the Air Force documents, if you look at even NASA documents,
you assume
a non-rotating level ground at all times in all places over all distances and durations. Okay, you can't magically turn that into an antipodal orb. Okay, it's just mathematically impossible.
Unless we're an orb of some
gargantuan millions of miles. I mean, but the problem even with that is the vastness of the oceans would still, we would have to be in a teeny, like basically like we have to be in a teeny little divot on a golf ball, basically, in order for it for us to still try to cling to this orbs in the void cosmology. But the fact is, the actual on the ground data in no way verifies contiguous rotundity commensurate with the curvature calculus of 26,000 miles. It just simply isn't there. Now, you can imagine it. You can theoretically superimpose and project that there's no such thing as a level anywhere ever, that it's ultimately all just hypergradual curve and rotundity, that we, in our pathetic little human senses, just can't see the full picture.
Except when they give it to you.
Except when they
in a
give
fisheye
it
lens.
to you in a fisheye lens. The masters of space, the space cowboy industrial complex, they know the real picture. Meanwhile, let's see. What percentage of people have flown over our non-spherical, unmoving realm? Like, how many people have been in an airplane, basically, from a survey point of view? Probably a majority of the population, right? Probably, what would you say, 75, 80% of the world's population has been in an airplane before? Maybe it's less. Maybe it's 60. Now look at the percentage of how many people have been in space. It's less than 700 people.
Right.
In all of history.
But you can't keep a secret that big.
You can't keep a secret that big. 700 people could never be pressured or coerced or voluntarily commit to a deception ever. Yeah, it says.
Are you still rescuing those people that are stuck in the space station?
Yeah, that's coming up in a couple weeks, I think.
How long, Jamie, they were supposed to be there?
They were supposed to be up there for like 8 days.
Yeah.
And they've been up there for like 8 months. We offered to bring them back early. This offer was rejected by the Biden administration.
Why?
And there's no way that they're going to make anyone who's supporting Trump look good.
What do you think they would have done if they had won?
They pushed the return date past the inauguration date.
Are you still rescuing?
Nice hairspray job.
This is where we've talked about the false critique.
It's
the false critique. Like this kind of stuff
and the passing
is
of
the most
buck.
evidentiary content I can imagine to suggest that he's not a trustworthy person. You know, the fakery, the involvement in this high level, like you're saying, 700 people ever, you know, that he's the paper richest man in the world is like secondary,
right,
to these kind of industries where we're talking about mass deception. And people really believe that you could have a mission. So you're telling me two things that contradict each other at the same time must be true. Like, to make space economical, we have to like freeze dry, you know, ice cream, and you'll be pissing in a bag that, you know, you recycle into your own drinking water and all this. They were supposed to be there for 8 days, and now they can just chill up there for 8 months.
And they left how many bags of poop on the moon?
Right. Well, I guess the innovation that our tax money is going to fund is poop. Well, how come I don't have a poop recycler in my house yet?
Right.
That was innovated by NASA. It's probably not economical, but no, it's just a crazy scenario that's and it seems like a Hollywood script. And
yeah,
you know, he does these PR things where the opposition, the Pepsi, as it were, you know, they didn't want to give me that opportunity to look good because I supported Trump. And it's like, that's just too convenient.
Sure.
That's the corruption we're dealing with, is we're playing with astronauts' lives.
We're playing with astronauts' lives because of a ceremonial popularity contest here on the ground. Right.
And by the way, there's no advanced breakthrough propulsion technologies.
Nothing to
I'm
see.
confident. I'm confident.
Nothing to see here, guys. Trust me. I know everything there is to know about space. Just look at my company's name. It's Space Sex. Okay.
Well, I found it funny, his defense or his argument rather, that there were no breakthroughs is that he has the most advanced rocket technology. And it's like,
rocket technology hasn't improved basically since it was developed by Jack Parsons, right? I mean, it's basically larger missiles pointed vertically.
It's like
large missiles pointed vertically. I mean, the whole ballistics concept behind that's the whole funny thing. Like, oh, rocket science. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand. It's like, there's actually not a whole lot of rocket science. There's not a lot of science behind rocketry. It's basically
maybe that's why they say it.
And pyrotechnics.
Maybe why they
Stuff
say
that's been around
it
for 300 years
is because they're trying to prop up this artificial
industry.
propulsion technology. It's kind of like if you bred horses and you bought a carriage company and you outfitted that, you pimp my ride on that carriage, and you had the fastest carriage drawn by a horse or horses, and meanwhile Mercedes-Benz is innovating the combustion engine and Ford is mass assembling, you know, cars, and you didn't know about it, and you're like, well, I have the best, fastest, most advanced carriage technology in the world.
Have you seen the shoes on my horses?
I haven't seen it. I'm confident that nobody has it, you know. And this wasn't included in that clip we played at the beginning of the show, but within the show he does talk about, like, well, I know Lockheed and Northrop and
Boeing
and he did mention that, but like there was another part where he was like, if his reasoning that no breakthrough existed is, if it did exist, then these companies would use it to defeat SpaceX in the commercial rocket launch industry. And I'm like, well,
conclusion.
Is it possible that they have the breakthrough? The commercial rocket pseudo industry is like nothing to us, and we actually have ulterior motives that supersede the little government contracts you're bidding on for this antiquated type of industry. Like, we're into bigger and better things. Like, we've got anti-gravitic technology. Like, they're not going to just, they don't need money at that point.
No.
And they don't need a little $40 billion government contract.
Right, and as I mentioned before, he's doing selective cleavering of low-hanging fruit. He's not going after the seed monies that are now in the thousands of percentage of growth in these big tech firms. Similarly, he doesn't know what's going on at all the deep underground military facilities. He doesn't have instantaneous and perpetual access to all of these black sites at the same time. He doesn't know all kinds of stuff. Okay, but he's pretending like he knows everything. That's what's so disingenuous about Musk, is he pretends like he knows everything.
And if you've ever met anybody with a security clearance, you know that they do not tell you the truth,
and that
they're sworn to secrecy.
It's an NDA, or they're just going along with the program and think that they have the noblesse oblige.
They can be deceived by their own compartmentalization.
Precisely.
And also deluded into thinking that they know a lot more than they actually do.
Right.
And it's like this whole canard of the security clearance, like, I have an all-access pass. And it's like, bro, what about all the testimony from people who say that, there are levels above top secret security clearance?
Yeah, that have nothing to do with the government, or at least the State Department.
Well, to Joe's credit, he's like, well, except if they're locked away in these big defense contractors, and then he just minimizes all these legacy military industrial complex companies, which it's like, bro, I know you have SpaceX and your celebrity and CEO.
You're part of the gatekeeping operation. We understand that.
And you had some footage of your rocket being, landed, and people laud you and celebrate you as some genius, but like
the greatest genius
I would not be
Hawking.
I would only be underestimating these legacy military industrial companies who have probably incredibly vast infrastructure, far sequestered from a top security clearance, unless I was an act deliberately planted there.
Bing, bing, bing.
That's the only reason why I would feel confident. Otherwise, he's so full of chutzpah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can see on his response that he's trying to concoct a plausible deniability explanation as he's being asked. you know.
Yeah, his eyebrow
His
goes
eyebrows
up.
like
He's licking his lips.
Let's see, what was that Neil deGrasse Tyson? Oh yeah, yeah. Are the footage of the aliens high res? You know, that's a great plausible deniability sort of distraction from the broader point. I mean, does he really have a full inventory of all of the subterranean infrastructure? Probably not.
I would
Probably
love to see Eddie Bravo on there with him.
Oh yeah, just coming up with this and this and this and this and this in his, you know, casual kind of way that he likes to do. I haven't seen Eddie Bravo on anything in a long time. Maybe he's just kind of
Probably had a falling out.
Yeah. I mean, Rogan, I mean, he's also a little bit there as, you know, a sort of kosher disclosure operative a little bit. He's showing you, you know, how much legacy media is basically obsolete show business. You know, he comes out in a workout t-shirt in like just a regular kind of looking studio, and he's got like 20 times the audience.
Right.
These sunken cost outfits of the corporate media. I mean, so he's a little bit he's part of the kosher disclosure. I think Musk is part of kosher disclosure in his own way too, by coming up with these just completely canned schlock answers that only the most drooling fanboy would accept. I mean, this guy is fronting like he's some sort of like omniscient demigod that's gonna just like set everything right when it comes to inefficiency. But he's only looking at, you know, a very small piece of the puzzle with his monocle. You know, he's not zooming out on the broader board, because if he did that, then he'd have to disclose and recuse himself, because he's part of the broader cover-up.
A long-standing conspiracy theory is what happened with like the Fort Knox gold, and
that's a good topic.
It's an interesting discussion, and I'm very happy that Elon and Trump have like been bringing it up. But if I think about the future and how this is going to go,
right,
forgive me for being a little bit skeptical and cynical that we will get any massive revelations from it.
We'll get a PR event,
but we will get a PR event, and it will balkanize probably more support for these guys.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it might end up kind of like the Epstein situation.
That's another topic.
It might end up like the Hillary, you'll go to jail type of situation. You know, like
or we
have these rhetorics which are on the nose, like hell yeah, like I can get behind that, which it makes me suspicious when they don't always like materialize like I would hope, you know. So like I'm encouraged.
Rarely, if ever.
Hey, they're drafting plans to fire 90,000 IRS. Wake me up when they're fired.
Yeah, wake me up when the Federal Reserve is audited.
Yeah. Well, yeah, nice. That's the next step. Like I can look. I've waited long enough. I can accept, you know, just due to the red tape and everything involved and all the opposition, which there is legitimate opposition. They don't make legitimate arguments, but they are legitimately opposed in the sense that they're opposed. It can take some time, you know, like cool, but like let's get to that end state. Let's not just tinker at the edges and make some, you know, cuts here and there for the PR stunt. Like it does need to eventually. And so with the gold, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Like, you know, there have been rumors that massive shipments have been coming in, that we've been repatriating gold, but you know that still doesn't answer the question, because you're dealing with the rehypothecation of the assets, and who's where's the titles, you know. And like if you remember during, I think it was Hurricane Sandy, the DTCC, the Depository Trust Commission, got flooded, and all this like original deeds for massive tranches of real estate and this and probably gold as well, was completely destroyed. And so, yeah, maybe it's there for the PR event, or maybe it's not for the PR event.
Right.
Ultimately, the question still remains, what about the Fed? What about the world reserve currency? What about the actual true valuation of assets? Because as we were talking about earlier with the real estate and how the government has its hand in the false promotion of nominal valuations on real estate, you can extend that same kind of corruptive tentacle across every asset class.
I agree.
Including gold. And I'll never forget, it was a big moment in my awakening when Ron Paul was questioning Ben Bernanke on the role of gold in the financial system, and he couched it as like a ancient relic, this and that, and he's like, what relation does it have to the dollar itself? And he's like, no real relation. He's like, well, then how come you guys all hold it? And Ben Bernanke was like, tradition. Mostly.
Tradition mostly.
Like, okay, there is something very strange going on here. So,
well, and then also you brought up the Epstein stuff, and there was that
Yeah.
whole like false feeding of the redacted documents, and I think that's a little bit of a canary in the coal mine for this entire administration.
some of our whole, our earliest episodes were around the Finders and the Epstein,
the massive network that he's a part of that is absolutely
and
tied to intelligence.
I actually have a talking point here for the show that written down, and I literally have written here, some of our earliest episodes dealt with the Epstein operation. It's just insane how many years have passed, so many suspicious twists and turns later, and the only perp who may have just been a fall person, Ghislaine, has been jailed or even identified.
Right.
Even identified. We've gotten flight logs here and there, but those people are all walking around like,
There's no. I don't see
nobody's getting deposed.
I don't see any subpoenas or depositions or indictments or anything like this, even though it implicates huge swaths of the corporate, political, scientific, and academic elite. Major personas in all these fields. Okay? You don't think there's a conflict of interest in trying to suppress that information?
Right.
And, which is the administration that's continuing this gatekeeping operation? The same administration that came in, there was about to go out right as this stuff was being disclosed. Because it was the end of 2019, and then the whole cerveza virus putsch basically distracted from all these revelations. And then swiftly, Biden comes in and sweeps a lot of that under the rug. And now that towards the end of his administration, all this stuff started resurfacing with even bigger and wider implications. And now who's back in to hand wave it away? And
isn't it amazing it's been that many years?
Yeah, we've going on 6 years since we started, and that was August. A lot of the Epstein stuff was like July and August of 2019.
And remember, Greta Thunberg was big at that time. That was like right before the corona.
Yeah.
Right before. Because we had some episodes around climate and Epstein.
Yep.
And that was right before the corona thing really set in.
And then our mega singularities, we definitely talked about, jabs being used as leverage for admittance into schools, and how we're like, well, this could actually become like a serious, and we had no idea that 3 months later it would go absolutely metastatic.
Right.
But we did mention that as like a point of concern at the beginning of 2020. It's like, this is the biomedical state kind of taking the gloves off here a little bit.
Yeah.
And then 3 months later, it's like, oh my gosh, we are in a 3-year long, unending big pharma commercial now.
Xavier's talking about our January 2020 episode, January 7th of 2020. We called it ZNN's Top 20 Mega Singularities of 2020. And we had 20 different kind of themes with various links to contemporary articles that formulated our kind of these are like the top issues to pay attention to going into 2020. And number 2 and number 1 really we talked about today. Number 1, disclosure of advanced Tesla energy and propulsion systems. Will it finally happen? And the first bullet on there was John G. Trump, who oversaw the Alien Property Custodian Office when Tesla died.
Trump's uncle. So we were talking about that 5 years ago, more than 5 years ago at this point.
At the end of Trump's first term.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And breakthrough in American energy dominance, U.S. Navy patents compact fusion reactor. But number 2, health wars is what we called it. Fluoridation, which is very contemporary now because we have that lawsuit that
the EPA lost.
That EPA lost and is, I think, appealing on the fluoride subject. And RFK referencing that lawsuit as a precedent for him in his new position as HHS secretary to basically how he described it was just inform the local jurisdictions of their now liability for not complying with the new EPA guidelines, which I'm all for that.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see it actually happen.
Yeah.
It's all been rhetoric so far, but the number 2 on that is what Xavier just brought up. The Seattle, it's not even available anymore. But it was a vaccine mandate for the schools in Seattle. And this is January 2020, right before. So this was top of mind for us as we headed into 2020, and then like literally just later that month.
Yeah.
And February, March especially, the whole picture started to get high res, to use Elon's term.
And and Trump still, he hasn't rescinded any of those national emergency declarations.
No, but he did.
He's only issued new ones, right? He issued a national emergency declaration at the border, right?
Every emergency grants new powers.
Yep.
He did say, like if the schools don't end their vaccine mandate, we'll remove federal funding, which is cool.
Well, after he was Operation Warp Speed General.
Hey. Yeah. Maybe he should capitulate to the popular sentiment rather than the big pharma influencers that he's clearly been subject to.
Absolutely. Well, they have all the money, though.
Did you see that? By the way, it was actually a African American. What did they call it?
Afro.
Black History Month.
Oh yeah.
What do they call Black? So it's a Black History Month event that he just like cobbled together at the White House at some point since our last episode. And actually, let me see if I can play it because we're about out of time, but I'd love to play this. It was a Black History Month, and then randomly the white head of Pfizer is in the crowd, and Trump calls him out and thanks him for being there, and he gets booed.
Is the current CEO still Albert Bourla, or did he change the guard there?
Yeah, Albert Bourla.
Oh man, that guy is a criminal.
Look,
that guy is a hardcore.
So he's at the Black History Month event that Trump put on, where like Tiger Woods was, and he congratulated him and some other black guys. Check this out.
We also have the head of Pfizer here, so I want to thank him. One of the great people, one of the great businessmen. Thank you, Albert. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Not too popular with the black community, I guess.
Oh no.
I'm like, why did Trump have him there? He's not black.
No.
He's the Pfizer CEO. Like, I guess he's trying to show that he's an ally or something. So maybe he wanted to be there and he asked Trump to be there. But like that didn't show good for either one of them.
No.
Showed very badly for the Pfizer CEO. And then Trump's over there trying to, thank you, like trying to calm the public down. Let me move on with the program here.
Forget that I mentioned it, guys. Let's move on to how great my plan is.
I wish they cut to the guy's face because, that didn't feel good.
Well, the dude should have been arrested years ago.
Yeah.
Years ago.
Great businessman, though.
Oh, absolutely. I only hang out with the richest and best businessmen, guys. Trust me. We're in the golden age where brinkmanship has never been higher.
Well, we are at the top of the hour, which is the end of our show. We've been live streaming now for almost 3 hours. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you like the content, I got some comments here I missed.
We got a couple comments.
I think we need to stop giving these clowns our energy by talking about them. They want our attention, positive or negative. Doesn't matter, because if we're talking about these actors, then we are not discussing who might be in control. That's a fair point. I mean,
well, I think we actually are talking about
we're trying
who's
to
in control.
Yeah, show the, like, maybe not showing the guy behind the curtain, but
demonstrating there's a hidden hand,
but showing that there's a curtain.
Yeah,
here's a curtain that you can pull aside, and
Yeah.
and that's kind of my gestalt for today, is just based on the conversations I've had with well-meaning relatives and friends and whatnot. Like I want to be excited too. I'm also not going to be alarmed in the same way as some other friends and family. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
I find myself in a weird place. Like,
me too.
I want to be excited, but not too excited.
Mm-hmm.
I am outraged, but
Not
not
for
for the
reasons.
same reason as
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and yes, I'm aware that clearly, if anybody listened to the whole show, like,
and our other episodes,
like we recognize that.
Wait, what do you think the Occult Thespian Network? And
Yeah,
what
that's
that term
pretty
means?
much all we talked about
Yeah.
today, was the potential for these two new celebrity government CEOs, essentially.
Screen-based personalities, right? I mean,
I literally talked about him being a hologram. So, anyways, and
any other comments?
It says, always like your content. Shout out to Lysurgis. I wish you guys called in tonight. You could have won a 444 tfuel, but I guess you don't want that, so it's gonna probably end up in Xavier's pocket.
All right, fair enough. I mean, I'll just build the stack forever.
Yeah, got to. But yeah, if you like the content, like and subscribe, share it with friends. Let me transition over to the today's thumbnail, and I will put on some music to see us out.